Good evening to Aïda Muluneh and all our audiences in Jakopič Gallery, where we are honored to hold this conversation with the artist talk in the occasion of the exhibition being shown in our gallery. Aïda, welcome. And my first question is about the artworks we see here. Of course, our audience here has the unique opportunity to see your work in a very space where we are sitting right now. However, there is always so much more beyond what we see. Looking, for instance, the first series on this exhibition, The Water Life, and the last one, The Road of Glory, we can draw a connection between these two series, recognizing your deep understanding of their universality, the broader meaning and hidden consequences of events and circumstances driven by, on one hand, at the Water Life series by nature, or at the Road of Glory by human acts of violence. How do you choose your topics? How do you manage to transcend local contexts beyond African, non-African, global South, global North, and instead bring forward themes that are universally relevant and urgent for all of us?
So regardless of everything that I've experienced and having traveled to different parts of the world, as you know, as a child, this has led me to understand that at the end of the day, for me, my main focus is about the human experience. But at the same time, it's also to shed light on the things that I think people living in their Western comforts might not be aware of. So when I was commissioned for the Water Aid project for Water Life, this was something that was funded by H&M Foundation. This was really my first commission. And when they came to me, I thought that they were going to ask me to do like photojournalistic work because I've done different topics relating to this, inside the country. And I've done a lot of work around health in Ethiopia and so forth. And so I told them, like, do I have the freedom to create the work that I want to do the way that I want to do it? And normally my process is really about, everything is mapped out, everything is sketched, there's a process to my method. And then they agreed to it. So for me, it was like a very fascinating experience because a lot of the stories in there is really based on my own experiences of seeing these women walking, for miles and miles with these yellow jerry cans on their back. And then I understood that the work of water and bringing water into the home, it's really the work of the woman, So these things, and mind you, like my family are farmers. They live in the rural regions, so I'm very well aware of these challenges. So through that, I started building the project, and then went specifically to Afar, to this location, which is basically the hottest place on earth. And to me, the landscape and the messaging that I wanted to make, this was very important to choose the right location. And it was also a way for me to show, I think the Western audience or the global North is kind of tired of seeing the same images coming out of Africa as it relates to like our challenges. And I think people are rarely are given the opportunity to see also our victories, our resilience, our capabilities to like find solutions within our own ways or in our own context. So what I wanted to present was someone to really look into the images and think of, of different aspects of what I was trying to express. And this is the same thing as it relates to the Road of Glory, which was the commission from the Nobel Peace Prize. I selected countries for that project based on countries that I had experiences in. So my childhood in Yemen, I remember Sana'a very well, but I know the Sana'a that I know and what it's become today is two different places, So all these places is a reference to my own personal history. And I build projects not through like a fantasy of trying to project things that I'm not aware of, but it's just something that I've experienced. And I'll take on projects that I find interesting, and I'll take on projects that resonates to just the things that I've been a witness to as a photojournalist as well. So in the building blocks of these projects, it's quite important, as I always say, is, to have a level of authenticity and to pursue, to pursue it with raising a question as opposed to trying to offer an answer. And there's one thing that I've always repeated.
The Road of Glory is also very interesting in an aspect that I heard somewhere you created it in a very short period of time, because it was just a commission from the Nobel Prize Center, which is amazing. It takes us around the world, and still you say you did it in a very short time. And it's anyway really fascinating to observe your creative process, which our visitors have the opportunity to do on this exhibition as well. There's a 5-minute video which really shows very well how your work is being done. And for me, it resembles staging a performance at first place, maybe. However, your stage is, as you said, often outdoors, sometimes in extreme heat with no shelter or shade. And still, the final images really reveal why such extreme precision is essential. But I'm wondering, where does your main creative process take place? How do you conceptualize and envision your ideas in advance? What mental, psychological, or personal processes are involved, and what kinds of inspiration shape this first stage of creation?
I mean, I've said it in the video, I do believe that creativity is like a spiritual manifestation. And, I stand by that, because it's just something that you have to be open to receive these inspirations. And for me, inspiration can come in the form of a poem or a song, or I'll see like a lighting somewhere, or, I mean, there's so many aspects to what motivates and inspires me, but everything starts with a piece of paper or my notebook and a pencil. That's how I start. So I start mapping out what is it that I want to say. And I also do a lot of research. And that's the thing, a lot of young photographers don't realize photography requires research. You need to read, you need to explore all the different creative outputs, whether it's visual, performing arts. You need to open your mind up to see what is out there, and so forth. So for me, it's making the work is probably the easiest thing for me. It's the other things that I advocate for, whether it's education or the festival, that's the most difficult for me. But it also has to do with really feeling inspired. I don't think I'd be creating the same work if I still lived in the US or I lived in Europe and so forth. And for me, like the biggest inspiration was being in my country in Ethiopia. And the reason that I choose to remain in Africa is because this is the place that inspires me the most, because you see such complexities and such huge spectrums of life here that you might not necessarily find elsewhere. So for that, my goal is, I look at the beauty and also of the darkness of the life that we live here, and process it in a way that, that I want to, in a sense, archive that moment or that feeling. And it's really, sometimes we'll go through this whole process. And just to explain to the audience, my backgrounds, I work with different painters. So my backgrounds are actually, I'm building a background, which is like 2 meters by 3 at times. So I like to see everything in the life. I'm basically creating that universe, my cocoon that I'm creating the piece through. So sometimes we will go through the process of making the background, everything is set up, all the props are made, and then I'll realize there's no shot there. So that ends up being that I have to reprocess. And for me, being organized and sort of making everything through a calculated form is so that I'm not, showing up on set and panicking because I don't know what else to shoot. It's a way to keep me calm. And I think a lot of that also has to do with my film education, because my background is in cinema. It's not in photography, but I chose to like pursue full force with photography. And now I see like every aspect of what I do. It's almost like, building the set, having my character, having my light, all these components, and then piecing the rest of it together, through post-production and editing.
Yes, what you just mentioned, I also prepared an example here, because I think it's really fascinating also to see the actual sketch you make for your work. This is a work which is not exhibited on our exhibition, but it doesn't matter. It's a concept for the work called The Stubborn Will of Darkness and Light. And this is your sketch. This is your, we could even say, mood board. So the sources of inspiration you are interested in. And then if we look through the process of creation, this work, okay. That should move. Okay. Let's see if it moves like this. Ah, okay. Ah, it was like this. Okay. Sorry, let's try again. So this is the sketch. This is the process. You doing a lot yourself. Of course, you have a big team as well who is helping you, but often you paint the faces yourself. Often you arrange models the way you want them. I find this one nice because also the models are probably kind of involved into the creation of the work. And then finally we get to the work itself, which is interestingly enough quite it does resemble, really does resemble the initial idea. Of course it looks different, of course it's a sketch, but still everything is there. And I find it also very interesting how you involve different sources of inspiration, as you already mentioned. Like this is the Christian iconography here, the female, it's not Madonna, probably it's a saint with a palm branch, which actually became a palm, kind of a palm branch here as well. But also what we see here is this famous René Magritte's clouds that you are also inspired by. So it really brings together so many different things, like Ethiopia itself with women dressed like Ethiopians, traditional outfit and hair. But then there is Magritte in it, then there is Christian iconography in it. So I think this is really a good example how your process looks like and how much you really do already imagine to be at the same beginning, at the initial stage of the idea. Would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's important to be organized. That's what it just comes down to, So, and the key thing for me is that this is not a work I do in like solitude. I think coming up with the idea is a solitude form, but in the actual production, I have a great team, and we're all hands on deck, and this is how we've been functioning. And the models, there's only specific models that I've always selected. And ironically, if I brought all the models together in a strange way, they have like similar personalities. So it's, the models become sort of my vessel. It's a reflection of me. So it's quite important to be like in sync. So even during the shooting process, I'm not really giving a whole lot of directions, all of a sudden the models will understand, what are the options that I'm looking for, and so forth. So for that, I've been quite blessed with that of, having a team that understands the bigger vision, even though at times it might be like very strange and peculiar, but outside of that, it's also the input of others around me. I find this also very fascinating of how my team perceives what I'm putting together, as well, because often they don't know what the sketch is, or they will not know what exactly I'm up to until like that first background goes up. And I remember for the Nobel collection, when the work for Darfur, after we finished painting the, stenciling and the skeletons in the background, and then they saw the models, the room just completely changed, and everybody was, in a very silent mood after that. So to me, it's a process that I enjoy. It's very time consuming, because I know some people ask why I don't Photoshop the background in. And I did that initially, and I realized it's so removed when you Photoshop in the background. I'm still looking for the imperfections. And the one thing that I always say, it's, in the process of the Japanese, it's perfecting the imperfection. And so these are the things that I find quite interesting. So sometimes when people look at the photos, they think it's a painting, and I wish it was a painting. And in reality, when you see my sketches, I'm just really a frustrated photographer who wants to be a painter, but I just don't have the patience to learn these skills. So that's why I'm painting everything, around me.
Well, important is your vision comes into life in a form that you
Yeah.
envisioned it. So it's not about the sketch, it's about the idea, of course.
Mhm.
And yeah, the deeper we immerse ourselves in your photographs, the more we recognize that your work is not just a reflection of history, society, or identity. It is in many ways a reflection of really your inner being.
Mhm.
If we take the series like The World is Nine, which was the first one you created after returning, or started creating it after returning back to Ethiopia, and The Wings That Roar, for example, both are rich in Ethiopian iconography, symbols, also traditional objects from Ethiopia. Yet they evoke really distinct emotions. The World is Nine feels really deeply personal, while The Wings That Roar carries a
The wings
profound.
that soar, by the way.
Oh, sorry. The Wings That Soar, yes, of course. The
It's a
soar.
good title, The Wings That Roar. I like that too.
Yeah, yeah, that would be different. Yes, the wings that soar. I'm sorry, I
No.
apologize. And yeah, visoko leteča krila in Slovenia. Um, and this series carries really a profound spiritual essence.
Mhm.
Beyond what is visible, what hidden layers exist within these works? How do you suggest looking at these works for us to be able to co-create their meanings?
Mhm. I mean, to me, I don't expect, I don't expect everyone to understand what is behind the work. What I would like is, and this is one thing that in an interview that I gave, the broadcaster said, "Oh, she didn't understand my work," and I said to her, "It's not for you to understand my work; it's for you to remember my work." So that's my ultimate goal as an artist, is to be remembered. So I know that, like, once you encounter my images, it's definitely something that you don't forget. You will recognize it anywhere else, or you will question, is that her work? So in that way, there's been different reactions depending on where I'm showing it. So for example, when I did the Joburg art fair in South Africa, I had South Africans come up to me and to say that it's their spiritual leaders who paint themselves white in order to be like closer to the divine. Like each location has its own interactions based on the culture and the community that's looking at it. But to me, the best critics, or the best input, is when children, from school groups, come to look at the show. I find those to be very fascinating, and what, children gravitate towards, because that's the purest form of comments that I receive. So often I've said, I have an allergy to elitism in arts, and also this over academia of arts. I think that our role as artists is to be able to share, parts of ourselves, and to sort of have an impact on the viewer in one form or another. And through that, I think, for me, and again, in different interviews, I've said, I'm trying to make things digestible. This is my whole process. But also, it's really that provocation of questions, for people to be like, what is that? Why is that there? And so forth. And I know then I've done my work. If the work is strong enough that it has come through, that somebody stops in its tracks and then spends time to look at it, then you see like other layers coming forward. And for Ethiopians, for the most part, Ethiopians know the messaging, the coding that I put in there. And that's always my first goal. And then the rest is just for people to understand that these are not works just for the sake of like an expression of vanity or whatever. These are works that have many layers, and many of my sort of, as you say, the coding or the secrets inside of them. And it's just to see how people react to it, and what people gravitate towards, because different people gravitate towards different images.
Well, I can confirm from my personal experience that I've seen your work in 2018. I admit I didn't remember your name, but it stayed with me. It was an open air festival actually in Baden-Baden,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen Diknish,
Mm-hmm.
and it really stayed with me as a visual, as an image, as something that has some kind of maybe even unconscious impact on our memory. And yeah, the moment I've seen it again in Frankfurt, it was Yes, this is what I've seen before, and this is what it stayed with me. So your works really have this power. And also what you just mentioned, there are multiple layers, and you clearly do take the distance from the stereotypes, like stereotypical representations of Africa. Yet, I feel at least like this, the archetypes in your work are deeply powerful. We see all these women on these photographs, and women are like warriors. They are women like mothers, the seekers of justice, figures of power, also figures of destruction even. Well, you've answered a little bit already, but are you also conscious about archetypes being present in your work? Are you using them? Are you working with them? And how does your use of color, that these primary colors, which are so strong, I know you study color a lot, and how does the color enhance or transform these narratives you do?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's, I've had questions before where people ask me, do I not take photos of men? And I said, well, I'm telling my story or the experience that I've had as a woman. So clearly I'm not a man, I'm a woman, and I'm going to use a woman to express these points for me. But what's been quite interesting in this journey is that even when you look at the positioning of the model, the gaze is very important to me because, I come from a country where we don't have colonial history, really. We're the only country in Africa that wasn't colonized. We grew up with stories of women rulers, queens, soldiers, all these things that when we talk about empowered women, like those are the stories that I grew up in. And then also looking at the women in my life. So for example, when you're speaking about the world is nine, this is something dedicated to my grandmother, because that's the expression that, she always said, the world is nine, she's never perfect. So for me, it was really to make that statement. But as it relates to the colors and going back to the 9/9 series, my main passion was black and white photography. This is what I felt the closest to very strongly, because I started in the dark room, and my education through my mentors was in the dark room, and then printing and developing my own things. And color was something that was very difficult for me. So when I started doing color work through the fine art, I said, okay, I'm only going to start with the primary colors because this is all I can process. I'm basically at the infancy stages of understanding color. So, I started with the red, the black, and the white, and then I decided to keep the red, then continue to the blue and the yellows. And the rest was just how to sort of construct and color block and to understand the relationship of these different colors together. And I'm still not there yet to fully understand color, but it was just, later on that I was looking back on my, photojournalistic work, of work that I've done in different regions and color. And I realized, like, in photojournalism, unless the color wasn't screaming at me, I don't take the photos of it, or I would naturally just gravitate into black and white. So the inception of it really came from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which sort of had been embedded in my psyche without really realizing it, because all, Christianity in Ethiopia is quite ancient. It's from the beginning of time. So when you come to Ethiopia and you look at our church paintings, most of the church paintings, which are like, I don't know, 800, 1,000 years old, the primary color is very strong in that. So I realized I was basically fed that, but it just came out in this form. And then through that, even though, when I was telling you the other day, like green makes an appearance like once in a while, but that's me just, trying to experiment with the color green. And then slowly, I gravitate towards like maybe, pink, which to me is just adding white to red, and then the turquoise blue. So I'm still not there as it relates to color, but these are the colors that I feel passionate about as it relates to what I want to say. But everything is just, it's a step. And this is one thing I try to teach students, that I try to tell them is like, when you jump steps, you miss that whole experience of processing things and to marinate in it. And we live in a world where everybody wants everything quick. They want quick results. Everything is about, the instant gratification. And for me, it's been like a slow process of really processing, thinking, and yeah, I mean, it's like a spiritual act for me to create work, because it's something that's very deep within me, and it's a very intimate process. But within that, it's also a release. It's almost like my therapy, to be able to shoot these things and get all these emotions that I have out onto the in front of the lens.
I see. And if we go a little bit maybe back in time when you returned to Ethiopia, you often mention that you create mainly for yourself, from your own inner need or passion and creative expression. Well, it's obvious that you create for us as well. When we see the photographs hanging, it is a strong message to each and every one of us. But I'm wondering how it was actually the moment you returned to Ethiopia and you started to work there. Because in a way, Ethiopians, your community, your people from your country there are subjects in a way on these photographs. So how did they and how do they nowadays perceive your work? How was and is the acceptance of your work back home?
I mean, I know I'm popular amongst the younger generation, which I find very fascinating, because it's really something completely left field to what is known as art. But to me, the most comical and the most hilarious is, at some point we started seeing my work. They would pull it off of the internet and they would make like an advertisement in front of a hair salon or some travel facility or something. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. That's when I know I've arrived in my country, is when they found, instead of putting in the hair salon an image of Beyonce or something ridiculous, the fact that they found value in this work, and then to make a large billboard of it. And these are like small business owners and so forth. So when I started seeing that, I thought this was very fascinating. And obviously we would call them and would be like, listen, this is kind of violation of copyright a little bit, but we appreciate that you found, you find some worth in it to find it quite interesting. So, I mean, as it relates to acceptance for my people, it's been a very interesting journey, and it's really that experience that has really influenced, what kind of work that I make, the messaging that I put in there. And I remember one of my sisters, she had come from the US to Addis Ababa, and she went to some like high school party or what have you. And they asked her why she was there. And she says, I'm here with my sister. And they're like, well, who's your sister? And she said, Aïda Muluneh. And there was a girl who almost fainted. And she says, oh my God. She's like, she's, the one artist that I can connect with, because it was okay for me to be different. So for the young generation to understand there's different ways of expressing yourself, that it's not just set on one rules or regulation, to be that obscure creator. So in that sense, it's been, a very beautiful journey, and something that even my relatives who come from the rural region, I mean, they recognize my work anywhere. And that's one thing I always say, is that, I want to make work that people that don't have access to art or have no understanding of art, like, they were going to stop and look at something and be like, what is that? So for me, my what do you call it? My testing audience is already built in there, already within the family. And so it's that's how I understand how people perceive it and so forth.
So shortly said, they took it as their own. Your art became theirs as well, if they use it for their hair salons advertisements. So
No, it's the most fascinating thing. I mean, it's like public art unintentionally,
Yes, wonderful. Yes, and speaking about your local community, I think the significance of community in art is something really important for the entire field of art or photography. In a gallery like ours, I've noticed that the main purpose of ours is actually not hanging must-see artists' pictures on the walls. but really to create spaces which can bring people together, which give the space to think, to engage in meaningful discussions, to exchange and to share what resonates with them. How do you see photography? And I know you are using photography as a tool of community building. How important is it for you? And where do you place education in the broader scope of your, let's say, artivism and the growth of photography communities?
Yeah, I mean, it's often in my lectures, one thing that I say is that photography has the power to create perceptions and perspective. And we are in a time period where we're consuming the most images ever because we have access to these phones that gives us access to platforms that we're able to thumb through, a lot of different types of content. And within that, I think that because Africa has been sort of, I don't want to say the victim, but there hasn't been a balanced representation to understand all the sort of complexities of Africa. And this had a lot to do also with media and how media has portrayed us, which hasn't really been so kind in the way to show the things that are working. To me, for example, I can go to New York and only take photos of crackheads and say this is New York, but we know New York is a complex place. And in that way, what I'm trying to get audiences outside of Africa is to start understanding the power of the image. For example, when you say France, and I've presented this to our late prime minister in parliament, where I said, when you think of France, what do you think about? You think about the Eiffel Tower. When you think of New York, what do you think about? You think about, the Statue of Liberty. Okay, when you think about Africa, what do you think? And often people in their minds, what they think about is like, either it's animals, the zebra or the lion chasing something, or a famine or war or challenges. And this is not to say that we don't have those things, but we have also other things. And so it's a way for me through my work to get that messaging out. But the key thing when I first arrived in Addis Ababa is I realized, I think as Africans, our focus should not be on talking about the problem. It should be about finding solutions. So my thing was that, okay, if we're going to address misrepresentation, then we need to develop a talent base. And okay, we don't have photo schools, or we don't have schools that are preparing our students for the international market. So my thing is that, okay, let me teach what I know and what has been transmitted to me through the mentors that I've had. So education has been really there from the beginning. I arrived like December of 2007 in Addis Ababa, and I started teaching in 2008 because I realized, and this is not because I had money, I was broke, but this urgency to teach was like so much in me, because I said, okay, if there's more of us in the system, that means that then there's different stories, going out. So for example, for me, I left my country when I was 5. I grew up in all these random places. My view of my country is obviously going to be very different than somebody who was born and raised there. So to me, having these different layers and different perspectives, this is so important. But at the same time, when you look at, foreign photographers entering into my country and how what they perceive to think that they know what's happening, you can't possibly know what's going on in your 10-day visit to be able to tell a story, as opposed to somebody who's been living there and, knows the integral elements of the society. So through that's why it was important for me to establish Addis Photo Fest, why it was important to start teaching. And really the big push has been, to bring visibility to these new talents that exist within the continent. And that movement is really something that keeps growing, because each year I'm finding new talent. And through the festival, this is sort of like the portal for me to really push them out there. And so that, because right now, a lot of editors are looking for photographers in the continent, because even if you look at the economic situation, photojournalism and so forth, it's better to hire locally. But my thing is that we need to prepare our photographers to meet the international standards and to understand what it means to construct images and narrative storytelling. So all these things have like, purpose. And there's also a key thing, in the classes, one of the things that I bring up to the students, and I said, okay, Google your country and look at Google image and see what are the images that show up, and through that, tell me, is this a real representation of your country? And so my whole agenda is really like, how do we change that first page to any place to show that there's more things than what you see? And it's, and now with AI and all of that, even for us in Ethiopia, we have a written language. I know that there's a lot of coders that are making a big effort to teach AI our language and to make sure that it becomes more precise. So to me, it's more than an artistic practice, because I do understand that what we do creatively, and especially as visual storytellers, it has, there's a technology aspect of it, there's an economic implication, there's a social implication, there's a political implication. And through that is to really, we're not just the archivists of this time for the next generation, but we're also the ones that have to change these old, archaic, cliche views of the places that we come from, but at the same time also questioning, our rights as photographers also to be able to document the things that we need to document in our countries, which also that bears its challenge as well. And that's why you see a large influx of fine art photography coming out of Africa, because we can't really practice photojournalism in the true sense, So there's many paths to this. But education for me, it's my hope is that by me being involved in teaching is to show any photographer across Africa that this is how we have to be able to transmit this information that we've learned, because it's going to be a while before our institutions catch up to, you know what I'm saying? To catch up before we're able to produce solid photographers that meet the expectations of the international market.
It really must be about the clear vision, and I mean, it sounds amazing what you do, and with organizing so much, and it must be really hard work. But probably also what we cannot imagine is how difficult it must be to work also with governments, with local authorities, because organizing a photo festival is no joke anywhere in the world. We all know that. And in Ethiopia, or establishing first East African festival, while probably many other, I don't know, segments of culture were still not even present, that must have been a real challenge. And I think your coherency and really, talking your walk and we could say authenticity must be really important here, is it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I've understood when I started at this photo fest in 2010, what was really important for me is to engage all the stakeholders, and that was also the government. So, and in that education process, it wasn't just to educate the general public of what is photography. It's also to educate the civil servants to understand what is photography and the use of photography. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make in Africa is that we don't engage civil servants to, even to invite them. And to me, I was the number one harasser of the Ethiopian government to make sure that they showed up, there was somebody cutting the ribbon and so forth. And to me, it's like you have to confront them with that, because at the end, mind you, the Addis Photo Fest, yes, it's based in Ethiopia, but the reason I wanted it to be an international festival, not a festival of just African photography, is because I do believe in cultural diplomacy. I believe that for our audience, they need to see these stories from different parts of the world to also understand, oh, there's actually farmers in Italy, even though people perceive that, everything is modern and so forth, but it's to create this connection so that we're not so far removed, that, we're just in our little corner and not really understanding the bigger scope of like what this world looks like. And the best tool for that is photography, So in that sense, yes, there was a lot of challenges, and most of the challenges always budgets, to try to convince people to invest. You have to remember, in Africa, there's a big push in investing in performing arts, but there's less investment in the visual arts, So if you have a concert, you'll get all the sponsorships that you want, But if you say, I'm going to do an exhibition, especially a photo exhibition, it's, crickets. So a lot of the support that I received was from the different embassies, different organizations, and it's just through that process. And then also, again, the team played a very important role, because to me, the dedication of the team, which is quite young, for them to be fully on board on this vision, these are very important things for me. And so we, I always say, organizing the photo festival, whether it's in Ethiopia or in Cote d'Ivoire, it's like it's the beautiful nightmare. It takes a lot out of us, but it's like giving birth, and you finally say, "Oh, we finally arrived at this point," and then there's a whole joy of it, and we have like so many memories of this experience, and all of this, I'm doing it with really limited budget and also with a very small team. We're not such a huge grand team, but the good thing is that, I have young people that believe in what I'm trying to accomplish. And then through that, it's just, it's been like, a wonderful experience. And I think I was telling you this, I don't know if I told you this the other day, like to me, we have an Ethiopian proverb that says, those who teach learn. So for me, I'm not just teaching, for the sake of teaching. It's just because I'm learning a lot from all these young people. And I find this to be very valuable. And it expands my view also to be embedded within, whether it's my society or another place in Africa, because it gives me that view that I don't have.
Absolutely. It is always about the exchange of knowledge we can share with each other, even with students or people who we teach. But also, you once said, if you do something with passion, you cannot fail.
Mhm.
On the other hand, you also advise young photographers that if they want to grow rich or get rich, they should do something else.
Yeah.
But still, can artistic purpose be considered its own kind of currency, its own kind of value? At the end of the day, what is that makes this profession worthwhile for the artist, him or herself?
I mean, in that quote, what I was trying to explain to young photographers or artists is that if your main motivation is to grow rich and to gain fame, it's that's the wrong motivation. Your intent cannot be that, because photography or art, it's about accepting rejection. So it's not for the weak, it's not an easy road at all. So I start off by telling them, get used to rejection, because you're going to be rejected continuously and you have to accept that rejection. But that rejection should be the motivator to make you push forward. And sometimes people give up too easily. And for me, it's really through all of these things that I've passed through, and even when I started early in my career, for example, I wanted to do fashion photography, and I tried fashion photography, and then I realized I suck. I know nothing about fashion, so I left that, and then I went back to photojournalism. So it was really ironic how, like, all of a sudden I started getting published by fashion publications, and I'm like, but I'm doing art, I'm not doing fashion. So it's kind of interesting how things sort of loop in. But I think for young photographers or any creative field, is that it takes a certain level of resilience, but it means that you need to know what your purpose is. Me, I knew my purpose since the age of 16. So you cannot be in photography or in art just because you want to have a gallery, show your work, or get into museums. You have to have a sense of purpose, and that sense of purpose needs to be authentic, because that's what the audience reads as well. Subconsciously is what the audience reads. So within that, that's one approach. And the other thing also is that there's so many variations of what it means to be an artist. It's not just one thing. You don't have to be inside a gallery. You don't need to be in a museum, but you can build your market. You can build, your following. There's different approaches. Even now, when you look at social media, there's a lot of successful artists that don't necessarily have ever been exhibited anywhere, but they found their niche market because that's the thing that they feel passionate about, or that's the approach that they feel passionate about. So when you know that, that's when you know sort of you're on that path. But it requires a lot of experimentation, and more importantly, it requires a lot of curiosity, and to really get out of your comfort zone and out of your city or out of your country to really see what the rest of the world is also making.
So passion, resilience, having the mission, knowing where you're going. But also, I think you really do teach by example as well. I think you are a very coherent person. You are very stubborn, I would say, or strong at least, and really persistent with what your goals are. On the other hand, you have a really broad knowledge of literature. You have broad understanding of, let's say, spirituality, at least as much I can see. Do you think that that type of uomo universale we know from Renaissance, you know, and we know these big artists, like important artists that shaped our, at least Western culture, is an ideal for the artist to follow still nowadays? Is it having this broad understanding of the world, how it functions?
Yes, of course. I mean, why not? I mean, the world is more accessible now than ever before. I remember when I started photography, in order to have an editor look at your work, you know, you have to take photos of your, first you have to develop your negative, then you have to print it, then you need to take a slide of it, then process the slide, then mail that slide to the editor, and you don't even know if it's all right, if the guy opened it or not, and so forth. Now everything is just on the phone. So I think in life, learning should not stop just because you reach at some point. I'm still learning today, you know, and I think you have to have that sense of curiosity to see what is beyond your circle or beyond your city. I mean, this is so important because that adds to the richness of your life as well. And that's why I'm always surprised that, you know, people who have passports where it can let them travel anywhere in the world don't travel. Like, I find that to be so peculiar, you know, because at the end of the day, it's like you're missing so much beauty of this world, of what exists beyond, you know, just the corners of your home or beyond your gate or your apartment. So in that sense, it's like you know, you have to be able to really explore even further, because you don't know what is going to motivate you and inspire you to change the direction of your life. And this is why you know, the power of artists, I think, more than maybe philosophers, is that we have the power to move individuals, you know, from such broad perspectives of broad spectrums. And that means is that we live in a world that is feeding us curiosity, but I feel that, you know, we have to be curious to go off of that path and to see what else is out there. And that's why, for me, for example, the reason that I do the festival is that, for example, you know, I have exhibitions all over the world, but the reason why we have the website for Africa Photo Fair is so that for people to be able to explore and see, you know, all the artists that we've exhibited and where they all come from and what kind of work. So that opens up like a whole other window, and to people realizing, oh, because for some people, maybe photography coming out of Africa is just animals and whatever, you know what I'm saying? Not realizing that there's a whole other languaging, there's a whole other visual aesthetics coming out of the continent, you know, and being exhibited in different parts of the world as well.
Yeah, you certainly have the point in that we have so much access and so much of very useful technology nowadays. But on the other hand, it really is about purposeful use of it, and really know why we are using it and not using it instead of having the broad understanding of what the cause and
Yeah.
consequences are on this in this world.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not only about artists being artists, but it's just I think that as those of us in Africa, I mean, I'm pretty sure we are the biggest promoters of our continent, you know. People coming for vacations into Africa, they're not coming here because some politician came to Slovenia and said, come to Africa. You know, it's because it was a provocation. You know, maybe they heard some music, or, you know, they saw a movie or they saw a photo or whatever. So the creative sector, it's quite powerful in disseminating these informations, and especially coming out of the continent, because we're the only ones offering another layer to it, you know, an authentic layer to who we are and what the society, you know, where the society is going.
Aïda, it's been a great talk so far, and I think it is the moment that we also let our visitors here in the gallery to give their questions, if there are any. Would somebody like to ask anything? You know, Slovenians are like proverbial, always quiet when you ask them if they have questions. They have a lot of questions going on, but, you know, they're a little bit shy.
No worries.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Aida? Hello?
Can I see your face?
Yes. It's me, Julia. Hi.
Oh, okay.
In that case, I have a general question and a specific question regarding this body painting practice that you utilize in your process. The general one is where this inspiration comes from. But the really concrete one was especially regarding the colors that you use, mostly, so white and blue, and these dots on the face, and as well as these, I would say, barbed wires on the neck. So what is this background, and how did this come into your photography?
I like how you're saying barbed wires, but that's hilarious. So the body paintings actually started really as if you go to the National Museum of African Art at the Smithsonian Institute, you'll see my first image that I ever made with face painting, which is in the permanent collection there. It's black and white. It's called The Spirit of Sisterhood. That was really the beginning. This was something that I made when I was in college. There was a fashion show, and they were asking for like images for the campaign. And I wanted to represent sort of my African roots. So to me, because the southern region in Ethiopia, in the area called the Omo Valley, they decorate their bodies with different clays and different natural paint, and there's always dots in it. So it was my way of reinterpreting that face, face painting from the southern region, and then the dots just basically stuck with me. And over the years, I've done a lot of research looking at, how Global South decorates their body. I find this very fascinating that traditional cultures use their bodies almost as a canvas. So when you look at face painting, tattooing, scarification, if anybody has seen the movie Wakanda, I mean, there was a lot of resources, especially that came out of Ethiopia as it relates to, these techniques. But for me, I come from the northern region of Ethiopia where women traditionally tattoo their necks. So that's the neck tattoo patterns that exist in the culture. And in our, where I come from, the beauty of a woman is by how long her neck is. So by adding these lines, it kind of elongates the neck, as a way of like accentuating it even more. So that became sort of the symbol. And, when Ethiopians look at the images, they recognize these traditional tattoos. For you guys, you just see lines. But for me, this is a statement of my roots and heritage. And as it relates to the color of the skin, when I started out with the 99 series, to me, because my section was the Inferno, for me, it was looking at like how people wear masks for power or, to get ahead in life. It's about like who's authentic or not. And that's why if you notice, often you can still see the non-painted skin because it's sort of to mimic this mask effect. But the changing of the colors is just based on sort of the mood that I'm in. But everything is really sourcing from traditional cultures. And sometimes in Europe, and I think it's been referenced that like traditional art that comes from Africa is like primitive, and to me, there's nothing primitive about it. It's actually highly sophisticated coding that even when you look at Picasso, I mean, Picasso took so much from Africa, heavily influenced by Africa, even though some people might deny it. But to me, it's basically to bring the past into the future, and this is really always my ultimate goal, even as we speak about Afrofuturism and so forth. So the body painting is in line with that languaging and that coding.
Thank you, Aïda. Julia is happy. We have another question.
Yeah, hi. My name is Metod. I'm a practicing artist. I've gone through fairly rigorous education abroad in Britain, in fact. And everybody was concerned about their recognition and so on and so forth. And effectively then later my practice turned to ephemeral, to invisible, and yet it still somewhat spoke or shouted from the eccentric center to the audience. And I was most struck by your saying that it's not for us to understand your art, but to remember your practice or work. And what would you say to the young or established or emerging artists who actually go and copy styles that they see online on their phones, in fact, and just reproduce without critical examination?
I mean, I think it was Picasso that was saying like to be copied it's a flattering thing. I mean, there's a lot of photographers that copy my work, but it's not like the original because it's not authentic. So I know that a lot of photographers don't like to share their work or their artwork online, but if people want to steal your work, they're going to steal your work, but it's not going to be the same languaging and so forth. But as it relates to, I mean, you're talking about your education and, to me, because I've done different workshops in Europe, and the one thing that I try to encourage artists in Europe, especially emerging talents, is that this is my personal opinion, but I feel that the education system is quite archaic and it's not in line with all these changing faces of what's in the current market. But I find that a lot of the times artists are trying to fit into this box to try to attract the attention of a gallery and so forth. And the whole point of education for me is to teach you the rules, but the whole point of being an artist is to break the rules, and that means is that through that process, you also have to find your voice within your medium of what you want to say within that work. But now that, everything is online, I mean, you can look at my Instagram account. I mean, there was a young Italian photographer who directly copied my work. And, it was a direct copy, and we sent, through the galleries, we sent a polite message, no response, ignoring all the way through. And then I made my statement, and it was just, there's no need to copy because there's so many possibilities, but these are artists that don't really last very long. So for me, that's the least of my concern. My concern is, how do I continue being innovative? How do I continue producing work that's relevant to me and sort of pushing that envelope? But there'll always be people who are inspired or they will copy and so forth. And that's when you understand, like, you've actually done your job, Does that make sense? Did I answer his question? I don't know if he...
Yes, Method approves or agrees with your answer. Thank you so much. And yes, we have another question.
Hi.
You hear it now, Aïda?
You hear me? Yeah? Okay. At the moment, you are in Abidjan, in Ivory Coast. So my question is very simple. Is it important for you to connect the eastern, western part of Africa, geographically, culturally sense? I mean, or is just coincidence that you are in these two parts of the world?
No, I mean, to me, when I was doing the photo festival in Addis Ababa, I mean, that was the inception of connecting Africa, and then from Africa connecting it to the world. And I give you an example. Like, I find that because of these sort of colonial mapping, we can be next to one country that we have no clue what's happening over there. So for me, yeah, of course, that is my motivation, is to connect these different parts of the continent. Because even when I teach, my base for teaching, I start with photographers in Africa. This is my bottom line. And then I go to other parts of the world, because I've always believed that, and you have to remember, like, a lot of the times, I think for young people, and especially young artists, there's always this fantasy of, like, the gaze towards Europe or to the West before even knowing your own continent. So to me, it's quite important to educate as much as possible about knowing. First of all, you need to know your country, because often I think people that are living in cities rarely visit other parts of their own country. And the second part is to explore in different parts of Africa. So, for example, me, I don't speak French very well, and a lot of people ask me, how is it that you're living in a Francophone country and, you don't speak French so well? And my thing is that language should not be our barrier. And that's always, the biggest hindrance for a lot of people. So from my end is that me, as an Ethiopian English speaker living in a country that's predominantly French, if I'm able to make things happen, then there's no reason why the rest cannot be moving around. And, when Ivorians asked me, how come you're not making any effort to learn French? And I said, look, I mean, the Chinese are here, they don't speak English or French, and they're still able to exist. So, don't come and complain to me about it, because my main thing is just, can we have an understanding? And through that effort, there's a lot of things to do. But often when you look at Africa, the Anglophones are together, the Francophones are together, the North Africans are together, and so forth. So there's all these sort of strange divisions that the base of it really comes from language as well.
Thank you. We do have another question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Una, and I have one question. I'm really sorry I haven't managed to see the photography exhibition yet, because you know how the openings are. You always end up chatting with people. So I look forward to seeing it, and I'm really inspired by what I see from distance and from what I've seen online. However, once you started talking about the project, I don't know, Water Life, you mentioned it was financed by or commissioned by H&M Foundation. So, you know, talking about the globalized world and the disparities. So this project is clearly, you know, advocating for, you know, or I still have to see, but you know, it's talking about disparities of resources and everything. And in the sense, we know that H&M or many of the fast fashion brands, you know, we don't need to repeat what is known. You know, there are so many things that they are doing wrong in the other parts of the world, but also in Africa as well, in the sense of disposing this huge, you know, having landfills of clothes that are shipped to Africa or to Atacama that are ending up in the Atacama Desert. So how do you reconcile, how do you choose to accept their, you know, their finances at the end of the day to support your work, knowing you know, somebody would say that this foundation and all their like conscious work is just greenwashing. So how do you reconcile with that, and how would you also, you know, let your students know or tell your students to be cautious, or how to, you know, how to accept or be, yeah, you know, sorry, I'm not used to asking questions without having premeditated, but yeah, how would you advise on, you know, who the finances come from, how critical should one be, or yeah, that's the question generally. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for your question. First of all, I've worked with H&M. They have a huge factory in Ethiopia. So I've been to the factory, and in that factory, just to give you some background information, H&M does not own factories around the world. They work with different companies that provide the service to them. But they have, I'm not an H&M promoter, by the way. This is just my findings, you know. But they have strict guidelines. So, for example, child labor, environmental issues, you know, as it relates to dumping things into the water and so forth, women empowerment, education, all these things are embedded within the merchandising or, you know, the products that they make in each country. So, for example, in Ethiopia, I think the only thing that they were making was, I think, T-shirts. There was a couple items in the factory, but they have these very strict guidelines as it relates to that. But to me, you know, obviously, for example, there's different funding systems that I don't apply for because I don't really agree with it. But as it relates to H&M, I mean, there's different views on it. But for me, as an Ethiopian in Ethiopia, what I've seen that they're doing on the ground, you know, I'm not speaking to you as someone who's read it somewhere. I've been physically inside the factory to see, you know, how the workers are treated, what kind of environment is it, and all these other things. So that's one thing. The other thing is that, you know, when we talk about climate, when we talk about water security, environment, all these things, you have to understand in the context, the reason that I got engaged in this project is, for example, Ethiopia has a large amount of water in the ground. We just don't have the financial or the infrastructure to get it out of the ground. That's one thing. But you have to remember, a majority of pollution is not coming from Africa. It's coming from these developed nations, you know? And you have to remember, like, you're living in Slovenia, you know, for example, if you're eating a fruit that's coming from the global south, let's say you have banana, you know what I'm saying? To produce that banana, you're taking water away from people that don't even have access to water on their own countries, you know? So I encourage, you know, young people and people that ask these questions that you have to, like, really look at the contribution that's coming from the developed nations and how it impacts on the underdeveloped nations, and the contribution of also this cycle as it relates to the secondhand market for clothing, for example, that comes into the continent. I mean, it's a business model, you know, in a strange way. Like for me, I didn't realize, I think it's like when I moved to Ethiopia that I realized that there was used clothing coming into the country. And then this is how like people were having access to like affordable clothing that they cannot have access to, or even just basic quality that doesn't really exist. So for example, for a company like H&M or any company that's producing in Ethiopia, they cannot sell inside the country. Everything is for reproducing and sending it back out. So there's a lot of conversation within that, but within the politics of environment, I think we have to be careful of understanding the system that is still feeding, from all aspects. When we talk about water, you don't understand the issue of water until you really like come to a rural region. And to me, for example, I'd rather live without electricity. I'd rather, you know what I'm saying? I'd rather have water. So, but having gone through all of that, and for example, we have water shortage in the city, or we have electricity cuts and so forth. So living in that sort of environment for like, I don't know, 15 years, this is where for me it was really important to engage in this project for people to understand that you cannot imagine the issues of water. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to actually live inside of it. But the implication is much more bigger than H&M. I guarantee you that. There's a political implication within that as well. So when you look at access to water in developing nations and who is, the system around it, I mean, look at, for example, Mexico City. Mexico City is going to run out of water, I think, in like 20 years or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's a much more broader thing than just one thing. And for me, my experience with H&M was quite positive. I spent some time in Sweden as well. So, I have like many layers to that experience. But for that, it's just, my impression of them and what I had seen. It wasn't, something negative or what have you, because I know that of these guidelines that they have. And that's why I chose to engage with them. But within that context, I don't think, we can even talk about Coca-Cola. I mean, Coca-Cola is everywhere. You know what I'm saying? That's more of a water consumer than anything else. So anyway, there's different ways, but as you say, yeah, I'm specific about where I get funding from. There's certain places that I would not apply for funding. You know what I mean? But I have to feel like very passionate about the project as well. These are really the base for me and the groundwork of it.
Thank you. I think we did. Oh, another question. Yeah. Is what?
It's like this. Hello, I prefer that you see me. Hello, my name is Yana, and I'm anthropologist by profession, and I really admire your work, and on the level of human experience, it really touched me in so many levels. And also, I would just like to make a short comment on the level of language, that the saying, the word is nine, sounds really perfect in our language, in Slovenian. Svet je devet.
Oh, nice.
It's such a perfect composition of imperfection. So maybe you should know that Svet je devet is beautiful.
Somebody needs to make me the T-shirt and send it to me, I think.
And I would really like to hear this saying in the language of your grandmother, if you could.
Yeah, so in our language, it's Alam Zetengnat. So Alam means world, Zetengnat means she is nine. So Alam Zetengnat.
Okay, thank you.
But you can Google Translate and you'll see it in my language as well.
And the world is she, you say?
Yeah.
That's also interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't have masculine and feminine, we have plural and singular. So when you reference an elder, you reference the elder in the plural, like in French, how you have vous and all of that.
Yes.
But we have certain things that have masculine and feminine, but not everything. It's not the same as in French. We have our own system for that.
Okay. Yes, thank you for this remark. Svet je devet. It sure is wabi-sabi as well, as you mentioned before in Japanese. And yes, well, we are running late, but I cannot avoid the last question to wrap up. And it is a bit personal, forgive me for that, but if I'm not mistaken, you are also a mother of two boys, of two young men. And I would like to ask you for the end, also from my personal point of view, how do you convey the significance of your work to them? How do you help them understand the role of a man in the world you depict, the one that challenges norms and seeks to contribute to a better future? So what kind of conversations do you have with your children about responsibility, identity, and art, of course?
Yeah, I mean, my kids, especially the second one, he basically grew up inside the festival, grew up in my work and all of that. The older one is in university studying business, so he knows sort of the resilience of my personality and what I've had to fight through. I was much younger when I had him, but you know, all the challenges that I had to overcome to reach to this point. And I know like the older one is quite proud of what I've accomplished, and for him to see me reaching these goals that I've set out from an early age on. And the younger one, he hates having his photos taken. So I told him it's such a shame to have a mother as a photographer. So he does not like photography, but he's an excellent drawer. But for him, I think growing up within sort of my network and all these traveling that I do, you know, sometimes I'll take him to places and so forth. I think it's been an enriching experience for him, you know, to see a female, you know, navigating all these spaces, the type of people that I've met, you know, different income brackets of experience. When we first moved to Abidjan, I made it a point to take him to like, you know, different areas, not to just stay in the bourgeois areas and so forth. So through that, I see that it has really enriched him, and he's very confident because he's had all these like experiences. And even I was telling one of my galleries that for me, you know, I didn't grow up with money, you know, and for my son to see, to visit different homes of different people that I know quite well and to see what money looks like so it demystifies all these aspects that money is not the beginning or the end, you know, it's not inaccessible, but for him to understand, you know, a way to navigate through that. So for that, I think there was one interview, they asked me what was my biggest accomplishment, and I said being a mother. I think that's my best accomplishment, because it's very difficult as a mother to maintain a career, to run a business, to teach, and to do all these things. You know, you have to be very precise with your time. So everything is like scheduled quite intensely. And I think it was you that I was saying that, you know, when women have children, especially artists, it's almost like they feel like they have to give up their creative process. It's not that. I think having children makes you more focused and more precise with how you use your time. And that's been the key thing for me, is really, you know, to transmit, you know, to leave a legacy behind for my kids that they can say, oh, you know, our mom like accomplished these things, and they have like an actual memory of all the processes that I've gone through. So I think for children, it's about sharing that path with them. And, you know, it's not like for my youngest, it's not an elusive process. He's been at different photo shoots, you know, different countries as I do my work and what have you. Now he's just sick and tired of me trying to take photos of him. So that's where we stand on that.
Well, normal for a member of the team, huh?
Yeah. No, for him I mean, now it's the teenage years, so I thought he'd be more vanity oriented and want his photos taken, but it's a definite no.
Wow. But this answer also proves that you did break the rules of engagement you've heard about when you came to Ethiopia, and that the ladders that seem to be too short for women many times, and they are actually shorter than for men, are still possible to climb and to reach the goals that you.
Yeah. No, but for my son, it's not about preaching to them. It's just seeing the life that I'm living, you know, to witness it all, you know. And I think it's living by example, as you said earlier. That's the only thing that I can do, you know.
Aïda, I know your time is precious, and I appreciate taking
I gotta
time
go home and
for
make
us.
dinner and all that. So.
Yes, it's time.
Yeah.
I will only say thank you so much. We are really
Thank
grateful to have you with us for this talk. And yes, just wish to hear for more and more exciting projects you do in in your country in Africa or whenever you
Thank you.
travel and work a lot as you do.
How do you say thank you in your language?
Hvala.
Kavala?
Hvala.
Kavala.
Hvala. Okay, I'm not going to ask you how you say it in your language because I might not be able to repeat.
It's Amasaganalo, but it's for some people.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it. Just thank you. Big thank you, Aïda, and have a nice evening. And
Okay.
cook well.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Yes.
Mary.
Thank
Ciao,
you.
ciao.
Bye.